The young father stood frozen in the baby aisle, holding a can of infant formula in trembling hands. For nearly a minute, he stared at the price tag. Then he looked down at the handful of crumpled bills in his wallet. His shoulders slumped. Slowly, almost painfully, he placed the baby milk back on the shelf. Most shoppers walked past without noticing. But one woman did, and what she discovered after secretly following him would uncover a heartbreaking truth, a hidden act of sacrifice, and a story that would change both of their lives forever. Stay until the end, because the secret she discovered inside his tiny apartment would leave her speechless. And what happened 1 year later brought an entire community to tears. Emily Carter had spent the entire day buried in meetings. As the owner of a growing marketing company, her schedule was always packed. That evening, she stopped at a supermarket on her way home. She planned to grab a few groceries and head back to her quiet apartment. Nothing more, nothing less. But life had other plans. As she pushed her cart through the store, something caught her attention. A man standing alone in the baby aisle. At first, there was nothing unusual about him. He appeared to be in his early 30s. His clothes were clean but clearly old. His sneakers looked worn from years of use. Yet there was something in his eyes, a mixture of exhaustion and worry. Emily noticed the shopping cart beside him. There wasn't much inside: a loaf of discounted bread, a package of pasta, a carton of eggs, a pack of diapers, and that was it. The man picked up a container of baby formula, checked the price, looked at his wallet, checked the price again, looked at his wallet once more. Emily watched as his jaw tightened. Then came the moment she would never forget. He quietly returned the baby milk to the shelf. Not because he wanted to, because he had to. As he turned away, Emily saw him quickly wipe his eyes. Her heart sank. Who was he? What kind of father has to leave baby milk behind? Emily tried to continue shopping. She picked up a few items, walked through 2 more aisles, headed toward checkout, but she couldn't stop thinking about him. The image replayed in her mind over and over. The way he stared at the formula, the sadness in his eyes, the quiet defeat on his face. After paying for her groceries, Emily walked outside. The evening sun was beginning to set. She spotted the man loading his groceries into an old sedan. The vehicle looked barely functional. One headlight was cracked. The paint was peeling. The rear bumper was secured with duct tape. Emily hesitated. This was ridiculous. Following strangers wasn't something normal people did. Yet something inside her refused to let the moment go. She climbed into her car and followed him. The man drove for nearly 40 minutes. The farther he traveled, the farther he seemed to move from the comfortable parts of the city. Eventually, he entered an older neighborhood filled with aging apartment buildings. Emily kept her distance. Finally, the sedan pulled into a small parking lot beside a rundown complex. The man stepped out carrying his groceries. Then something happened. 3 children came running from the building entrance. A little girl around 8, a boy no older than 6, and a toddler barely able to walk. The tired father's entire face transformed. The sadness disappeared instantly. A smile replaced it. He knelt and opened his arms. The children crashed into him with laughter. Emily felt her throat tighten. She expected hardship. What she hadn't expected was love. So much love. The father picked up the toddler and carried him upstairs while the older children held his hands. It looked like the happiest moment of their day, and perhaps it was. The next afternoon, Emily returned. She knew it sounded crazy, but she needed answers. An elderly woman sat outside the apartment building watering plants. Emily introduced herself and carefully asked about the father. The woman smiled. "Daniel Brooks," she said. "One of the finest men you'll ever meet." Over the next few minutes, Emily learned the story. 2 years earlier, Daniel's wife, Sarah, had died after a long illness. The treatments had drained every dollar they had. When Sarah passed away, Daniel was left alone with 3 children. Since then, he had worked non-stop. During the day, he delivered packages. At night, he worked maintenance shifts. Every paycheck disappeared almost immediately. Rent, food, utilities, medical debt, childcare. The list never ended. The elderly neighbor shook her head. "I've never heard him complain." Emily listened quietly. The woman continued. "He skips meals sometimes." Emily looked up. "What?" The woman nodded. I've seen it myself. He tells the kids he's not hungry. Then he watches them eat. Emily felt a lump forming in her throat. Suddenly, the baby formula made sense. Daniel wasn't choosing between luxuries. He was choosing between impossible necessities. A few days later, Emily returned again. This time, she stayed hidden in her car. Daniel arrived home carrying groceries. The little girl greeted him at the door. Emily noticed something strange. The groceries looked even smaller than before, yet the children seemed excited. Minutes later, through the apartment window, she saw Daniel cooking. The children gathered around the table. The meal was simple, very simple, but the family laughed together as if they were dining in a fancy restaurant. Then Emily witnessed something heartbreaking. Daniel served food to each child. When everyone else had eaten, he quietly claimed he wasn't hungry, exactly as the neighbor described. Her eyes filled with tears. He was sacrificing his own meals again and again and again, just to make sure his children never went without. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Daniel place the baby milk back on the shelf. Finally, she made a decision. The next morning, she filled her car. Baby formula, diapers, fresh food, children's snacks, milk, fruit, vegetables, enough supplies to last weeks. Before sunrise, she left everything outside Daniel's apartment door. On top sat a simple note. For someone who refuses to give up, your children are lucky to have you. No name, no signature, nothing else. Later that morning, Daniel opened the door. Emily watched from a distance. His eyes widened. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then he picked up the note, read it, and began crying. Not loud crying, the kind people do when they've carried too much for too long. The kind that comes from relief. For the first time in months, perhaps years, someone had seen his struggle. Someone had noticed. Most people would have stopped there. Emily didn't. Something about Daniel's story continued pulling her back. Over the next few weeks, she learned more. And what she discovered shocked her. Before Sarah became sick, Daniel had been studying engineering. Not only that, he was exceptionally talented. Former professors described him as brilliant. His grades had been outstanding. His future looked incredibly promising. Then Sarah's illness changed everything. Daniel left school, worked multiple jobs, put every dream on hold. Not for himself, for his family. He had sacrificed his future so his wife could receive treatment and his children could survive. Emily couldn't stop thinking about it. This wasn't a man who lacked ability. This wasn't someone unwilling to work. This was someone trapped by circumstances. Someone who needed a chance. Just one chance. A week later, Emily finally introduced herself. Daniel looked confused when she approached him outside the apartment. She offered to buy him coffee. At first he declined. Eventually he agreed. During their conversation, Emily learned even more. Daniel spoke constantly about his children, rarely about himself. Every decision he made revolved around them. Every sacrifice, every struggle, every sleepless night. Emily finally asked the question, if someone gave you an opportunity, what would you do with it? Daniel didn't hesitate. I'd build a future for my kids. Not a bigger house, not a nicer car, not luxury. His children. That answer told Emily everything. A few days later, Emily invited Daniel to her office. She offered him something he never expected. A position managing operations for her growing company. The pay was significantly better. The schedule was flexible enough for his children. There were benefits, training, and room to grow. Daniel stared at the offer, speechless. Then he asked the question Emily would never forget. Why would you do this for me? Emily smiled. Because now it was time for honesty. She told him everything. The supermarket, the baby aisle, the formula. The moment she saw him put the baby milk back, the moment she followed him. Daniel sat silently, then lowered his head. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were filled with tears. You saw that? Emily nodded. Yes. Daniel smiled sadly. That was one of the hardest days of my life. 12 months passed. Life looked completely different. Daniel excelled at his new position. His natural intelligence quickly became obvious. Promotions followed, then raises. The crushing financial pressure slowly disappeared. The debts began shrinking. The apartment was replaced with a modest but comfortable home. The children thrived. The toddler, who once depended on that missing baby formula, was now running around the backyard laughing. The little girl was excelling in school. The young boy had joined a soccer team. Most importantly, Daniel no longer had to choose between feeding himself and feeding his children. One sunny afternoon, he invited Emily to a family barbecue. Neighbors gathered, children played, laughter filled the yard. At one point, Daniel raised a glass. Everyone grew quiet. He looked toward Emily. "I want to thank the person who changed our lives." Emily immediately shook her head. But Daniel continued. "A year ago, I thought nobody noticed what we were going through." He paused. "I was wrong." Tears appeared in several eyes around the yard, including Emily's. Daniel smiled. One person noticed. Later that evening, as the sun began setting, Emily watched Daniel playing with his children. For a moment, she thought about that first day. The exhausted father, the nearly empty wallet, the baby formula returning to the shelf. How easily she could have looked away. How easily she could have ignored it, just like everyone else. Instead, she paid attention. And because of that, an entire family's future changed. But deep down, Emily knew something important. She hadn't rescued Daniel. Daniel had carried his family through impossible circumstances. He had shown courage every single day. She had simply opened a door, and Daniel had walked through it. Sometimes the people carrying the heaviest burdens are the ones who complain the least. Sometimes heroes don't wear suits, uniforms, or capes. Sometimes they're exhausted single parents standing quietly in a supermarket aisle, trying to figure out how to feed their children. Emily Carter noticed what everyone else missed, and Daniel Brooks never stopped fighting for his family. So here's the question. If you had seen Daniel put that baby milk back on the shelf, what would you have done? Would you have walked away? Or would you have stopped to help? Comment, kindness still exists, if you believe one small act of compassion can change someone's life. And if Daniel's story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that even the smallest kindness can create a future nobody thought was possible. Because sometimes all it takes is one person who chooses to notice.